The fine notice came folded neatly in an envelope, slipped under my front door as if it were an invitation to something polite, not a threat. The letterhead screamed Oak Ridge Ranch Estates HOA in bold serif font, but the words underneath had Karen's fingerprints all over them. Violation. Unauthorized gate closure. Fine, $5,000. Immediate payment required. That was it. No explanation, no consideration, not even the courtesy of a conversation. Just a number and the assumption that I would pay. The gate in question wasn't decorative. It wasn't some silly little iron arch at the end of a suburban cul-de-sac. It was the gate to my grandfather's ranch, a gate that had been there longer than the HOA itself, longer than half the houses in the subdivision, longer than Karen's entire career of meddling in people's business. That gate had seen cattle drives, dust storms, and more winters than I cared to count. It wasn't just a barrier of metal and hinges, it was history, and I locked it for a reason. Coyotes had been ranging closer to the barns. My bulls were restless in the late summer heat, and the maras had foals at their sides. Leaving the gate open wasn't just careless. It was dangerous. But try telling that to an HOA that thought ranchland was just an extension of their manicured parks and jogging trails. I sat with the letter in my hands for a long time that morning, sipping black coffee while the sun crept higher over the pasture. The cattle lowed in the distance. Horses stamped and snorted, tails flicking against flies. The ranch had its rhythm, its pulse, and it didn't beat according to Karen's calendar or her rulebook. That's when I decided I wasn't going to pay her dime. If she wanted a lesson, I would give her one she'd never forget. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A week later, the HOA held their annual Founders Day Festival in the Central Park. They made a big show of it every year. Banners stretched between lampposts, barbecue pits wheeled in, kids' bounce houses, and a live band that mostly played covers of 70s rock. But it wasn't really about community. It was about Karen. She strutted through the crowd in her wide-brimmed hat and glossy heels, shaking hands as if she were a mayor campaigning for re-election. The whole festival was her vanity project. I brought the bulls. Not immediately, not in the broad daylight where someone might have stopped me. No, I waited until dusk, when the band struck up its third set, and the smell of roasting meat and spilled beer had dulled everyone's senses. That's when I walked to the locked gate, the same one they'd fined me for, and swung it wide. Behind me, 24 bulls shifted eagerly, nostrils flaring, eyes bright with the energy that only comes at sundown. The horses stood restless too, tossing their heads as if they could sense what was coming. I whistled, a sharp sound that cut across the pasture, and slapped the nearest bull on the flank. The herd surged forward, hooves pounding like distant thunder. The horses followed, tails high, manes streaming. Together they moved as one wild, unstoppable tide straight toward the HOA's precious park. What happened next was chaos. The first bull hit the park fence like it was made of twigs. It splintered, with snapping in sharp reports that silenced the music mid-song. People turned, frozen in disbelief, as 2,000 pounds of muscle and horn came barreling into their festival. Then came another, and another. Karen's catering tables went first, toppled in a spray of coleslaw and potato salad. A mare leapt the bounce house, landing neatly in the middle of the dance area while kids squealed in delight, thinking it part of the show. Another horse discovered the punch bowl and happily dunked its muzzle, sending sugary liquid spraying across horrified guests. And the bulls, oh, the bulls, they owned the place. They rooted in the grass, chased scattering HOA officers, and rolled over Karen's carefully rented stage equipment like it was nothing but toys. At one point, 2 of them found the gazebo where Karen was supposed to give her speech, and began headbutting it until the entire structure collapsed in on itself. I stood at the edge of the park, arms crossed, just watching. People ran. Some screamed. Some filmed with their phones, catching every glorious second of Karen's festival being turned into a stampede spectacle. And Karen herself? She climbed onto a picnic table, shrieking commands no one followed. Her voice drowned out by the roar of animals and the laughter of neighbors who'd grown tired of her tyranny. By the time the sheriff showed up, summoned by frantic 911 calls. The park looked like a battlefield. Tables overturned, banners shredded, grass torn into muddy clumps by hooves. And in the middle of it all, the bulls and horses stood calm now, chewing contentedly, as if they'd been invited guests at the world's strangest dinner party. The sheriff looked at me, then at the wreckage, then back at me. His mouth twitched like he was trying hard not to laugh. "Let me guess," he said dryly. "This is about that gate fine?" "Gate's open now," I replied deadpan. He shook his head, chuckling. "Can't argue with that. The HOA tried to fine me again, of course. They claimed reckless endangerment, property destruction, community disruption, but none of it stuck. My lawyer pointed out that their original complaint had been about the gate being locked. Now the gate wasn't locked. If they didn't like what came through it, that was their problem. The townsfolk never let them live it down. For months, every time Karen tried to speak at a meeting, someone in the back would moo or whinny. People wore novelty cowboy hats to HOA events. Someone even printed t-shirts that read, "Bulls for freedom, HOA for fines." And me? I kept the gate exactly as I wanted it. Locked when it needed to be, open when I decided. Because out here, the land answers to the people who work it, not to people with clipboards and inflated egos. Sometimes, when I pass by the park at sunset, I can still see the hoofprints in the dirt. Faint scars where the herd reminded Karen of something she should have known all along. You don't fine a rancher for locking his own gate. And you sure as hell don't invite his bulls to a party unless you're ready for the stampede.